Hello, my beautiful besties. Welcome to episode 74 of the M Take. This is a solo episode today. It's my beautiful bestie, Melissa Rose, is sick and not well, and we wish her the most beautifully robust healing vibes. It sucks when your friends are sick and you feel helpless, It's like you're trying to stay afloat while just making sure you're checking in on your people. That's all you can do. But I wanted to take this opportunity to record a solo episode, which is definitely out of my comfort zone. I have to hide my face so I don't stare at myself. Um, talking. I hear Mel laughing in the background. But it's been a long time coming because Mel recorded her birth stories, Mel's version, and I've been really wanting to record a solo episode on my first birth story, which was in September of 2020. And just to like start diving deep head first, that time was really, really, really hard, given that we were in the middle of a global pandemic, building planes at the same time while flying planes and not really knowing what was going to happen. I remember hearing that birth partners weren't allowed in the birthing room and just feeling fully immersed in so much anxiety of the unknown of what was ahead. So just a moment for the mamas who gave birth and were pregnant during quarantine and during that 2020 and 2021 time. It was like nothing. I mean, I had nothing to compare it to, but we were all just living in such unprecedented waters at that point. So, like that aside, no one also talks about how long the last few weeks of pregnancy can feel. And then just every little twinge or feeling, you're like, is this it? Am I going to go? Again, you have nothing to compare it to. Um, so I went into, birth. I knew I didn't know what to expect. But at the same time, I had a vision of what I thought it would be like, and it's just completely different from what you imagine it to be. And I think there's just such power in embracing that and accepting it. And I'm a type A plus 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 planner. And you can only plan so much. So being able to relinquish all control is a huge ticket to just feeling like, it's supposed to unfold in the way that it's supposed to. I could talk forever about that in and of itself, but just wanting to set the tone before I kind of dive in and share my story and also some takeaways to keep in your back pocket if you are expecting or thinking of expecting. And if you're listening to this, hoping one day to, grow your family, but maybe the path has just been a little bit harder than you thought it would be. I'm just sending your heart a huge hug. Those moments can feel so, so alone. And sometimes listening to stories helps, sometimes it doesn't. So if you feel like this is triggering, then pause and come back at a different time when the time is right. But just always wanting to make sure people feel seen and heard in some capacity. Um, so let's flash. Actually, let's start from the very beginning because I think that's an important piece here. Um, we found out we were expecting with our first kiddo in January of 2020, right before I turned 30, which is so exciting. And we were able to share our exciting news with our families in person, which now in hindsight, I'm so grateful that we were able to do. I was able to hug my mom and hug my dad and hug Ryan's parents and tell them that they were going to be grandparents either again or for the first time. And then, flash forward to March of 2020 when the whole world shut down. And that's really when I was starting to show a little bit of a belly. And it's wild to think that that was the last time that, I was able to give my parents a hug, and they weren't even able to touch my belly. I just remember feeling so anxious heading in to the rest of the spring months and definitely the summer months as I was nearing the third trimester. And I remember my mom threw me an amazing like drive-by baby shower where everyone was socially distant. And I remember Mel even just like drove by like in the car. So some people felt comfortable coming and staying outside in masks, but even just that experience, it was just all I knew, but so not what I had envisioned or pictured for my first kiddo and my first baby shower experience, that's for sure. Um, and then I remember heading into the month of August. We were actually working remotely at the time, and I was in a school. And there were incredible heroes in that school that went back into the building to try to make school feel like school, even though it didn't. But there were people on ground, and knowing that I was, a couple weeks away from having my son, that was not in the cards. And I was grateful that I was able to kind of culminate my time working there remotely. And I didn't know that my son would be really late. So you hear this, that a due date is just a moving target, and seldom times there are babies who are born on their due date. But let me tell you something. You have to look at the due date as a window of a maybe, but a probably not. Um, I was almost 2 weeks late with my little guy, which is crazy. So the whole month just disappears because you're anticipating. Kind of reminds me of wedding planning in a sense. Like you're anticipating a couple weeks out from your due date, like, oh, could be any time now. Like friends are checking in on you and families checking in on you, and every twinge is like, oh, is this it? And then the date gets me closer and closer, and nobody talks about how long those last few weeks of pregnancy can feel. I know there are some mamas who go earlier. I was not that. So I remember my due date approached and I went to my appointment, and they were like, yeah, you're not even dilated. He's looking cozy in that one womb apartment. I remember making that joke a lot. And just feeling like, okay, I'm in it for the long haul. Like I am this, we just gotta keep busy. I remember my sister-in-law telling me that, like, don't forget, you're gonna just find something to keep busy. I was like, oh, I'm gonna love, like, I'll be off work, I'll go for walks, I'll organize. Mamas, if you're listening to this, please find something to do to keep busy if you make it to your due date, because it is just the longest couple of weeks that you can't even expect. And I did go for my long walks, and I absolutely loved going for my long walks, but I needed to cook everything under the sun and see if something could make it happen. And I remember like, the mucus plug, like, oh, that's gonna come out, and you got your bloody show, and like labor is imminent. But I promise you, that could be the case for people, but it absolutely was not the case for me. And I remember feeling like a little defeated. Like, is this baby going to come? And when is it going to happen? I just want to meet the person who's going to change our lives and our family system literally forever. And I promise you that while those weeks can feel longer than, my oldest is now 5.5, that period of time felt longer than the past 5.5 years, which is also sobering in and of itself. But keep busy. And if you're in that period of time, or you're projecting that you could be, like, you will get through and you will meet that beautiful little baby. But it's just, you got to kind of subscribe to the fact that you're going to be in it for the long haul, especially if induction is then on the table. So, fast forward, I made it from 40 weeks to 41 weeks. And I just like totally leaned into the fact, like, he'll come when he's ready. He'll come when he's ready. And then at my 41-week appointment, the doctor was like, "All right, we have to talk about induction." And I took the natural birthing company course, which was fantastic. Positive birthing company, sorry. She was absolutely amazing. And I learned so many little takeaways and mantras, and it just aligned really well with my personality and the way that I saw my birthing experience going, as much as I could. And I remember she wasn't anti induction, but she was very pro it'll happen when it happens. And I just remember getting to 41 weeks and being like, okay, dude, like you're bigger than a little pumpkin. Like it's time. It is time to come out. And I knew that, we were most likely going to have to lean toward the induction route. I was losing some amniotic fluid and I just leaned in. And I think that that's also a really important lesson of wanting things to happen naturally and also knowing when you have to make a decision a little bit more synthetically. And I knew that, we had to do that. So we went in for the induction, even waiting for that call. They were like, so with induction mamas, like, you really have to come in between like 4 and 8 p.m. on a Monday. And I was like, dude, I have to wait all day to know if I can come in between 4 and 8 p.m. Like it just felt like such a long process. So getting on the same page with your partner about keeping busy. I remember we went to like a nearby park and walked around and we attempted to take like vlogs, which are so cringy but so beautiful to look back on now, during that time. And then we got the call. I remember around like 5 p.m., like eat your meal, eat your last meal and come in. And the adrenaline, I mean, you have to work so, so hard to control it, which is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to controlling the adrenaline rushes during birth, and that part of labor. But I remember just feeling so excited and like, okay, we have a green ticket, we have a way in. Um, and we went home. I had like this big bowl of buttered noodles, elbows to be specific, like a glass of milk. I don't know. I felt like I was prepping for a marathon. And they told us we could come by like 7 p.m. So we were so excited, so eager, ready to go. And they gave, after being hooked up to everything and getting admitted, it's already like 9 o'clock at that point. And I'm like, oh my, like we are truly in it for the long haul. And so I remember they gave me the oral cervix softener that they were like, okay, so we're going to give this to you now. Like you could dilate and go right into labor, but that also could take some time too. So again, you're just like fully subscribed to this ambiguous zone of not knowing. And nothing happened. Like absolutely nothing happened. The only thing that happened is that I was hooked up to these big belly bands and hearing the beeping, which I later found out I could ask the nurse to lower. So like advocating for yourself when it feels uncomfortable because you just want to emulate like this environment that's going to feel relaxing and full of vibes that you want to, make your overall experience just as warm and comfortable as possible. And beeping overnight while I knew nothing was happening, while I knew nothing, I wasn't dilating. I was like, oh my God, like, are we ever going to get to this finish line? Like, it just feels like forever, truly. Um, and I remember having the worst sleep. Ryan also was like on his little pull-out cot next to me, like not sleeping well. And in my head, I was like, oh God, like how much longer is this going to take? I just want the sun to rise so we can get the Pitocin started, which was the second round of the induction process if the cervix softener wasn't going to do anything. So what already felt like this mental marathon of like truly weeks 38 through 41 plus, a few days. And again, this like daily, is this it energy? Then we're in the hospital and we're just waiting for like the next chapter. Um, and it's funny, you feel, or at least I felt this like beautiful sense of hope, but also this desire to feel the need to let all of the people know, like in our circle, our family members who knew we were there, like that I was okay, but also like nothing has happened yet. You're almost like tempering everybody else's expectations and excitement too. But also like, their disappointment of nothing has happened either. And not that that was shared in any way, but I remember feeling that as like a mental load, emotional load, on top of it. So the sun came up on the Tuesday of September 22nd, which is now my son's birthday. So I know now in hindsight, there was a finish line to that, but it's 7 a.m. And just for perspective purposes, because I think this is helpful from a timeline perspective, especially for the new mamas. My son was born at 10:31 p.m. So we are rising, happily embracing a new day. It's the morning of September 22nd, and the nurse came in, said I could eat something, which was great. But at that point, I had no appetite. I just remember I like needed to scarf down some oatmeal and some coffee and some Gatorade, not knowing, what the day looked like ahead of me. And I believe they started Pitocin at around 8 a.m. that day. And it's a slow roll. I remember I had these goals of just wanting to stay upright as long as possible to help gravity, do its thing with pushing baby down. And I knew that I wanted an epidural. All the power to the mamas who know they don't. I was not one of those. So I wanted to make sure that I could stay as upright as long as I could, because once I did pull the trigger for the epidural, I knew that I was going to be bedridden and more horizontal, which can stall labor and like the getting to the final push. So we're standing, we're feeling good. I remember like feeling some contractions, but I could talk through them. And thank goodness Ryan took some videos. I highly, highly recommend that happen. If you have a birth partner with you, I just look back on those videos and it feels like a fever dream in the most beautiful way. But highly, highly recommend you capture those moments on camera. And I remember every half an hour, the nurse would come in and say like, all right, how you doing? Are you ready to increase the Pitocin? And I was like, let's go. Like I was just so excited and so ready. And we just continued to increase the Pitocin. And I remember the contractions feeling a little bit stronger and stronger. I've said this before in a couple of our babies episodes. Go back and listen to those if you haven't before. Um, but I remember thinking like a contraction. I remember hearing from someone that a contraction felt like a very strong period cramp. And while I can understand that perspective, for me, as contractions got more and more strong, it felt like a full body Charlie horse. Like out of nowhere, you're fine. And I'm just like chit chatting with Ryan or the nurse. And all of a sudden, everything just like froze up and you're just in pain, your whole body. And then there's like these intense tightenings that you want to work hard to remain calm and relaxed through. And then all of a sudden, 30 seconds, 60 seconds, sometimes 90 seconds goes by, and it's as if a switch flips and you're completely back to normal and you can talk, and it's as if you've sobered up and you're like, oh, I'm good. I can have another drink or another shot. When like you're probably close to blacking out. But it's a wild ride. I remember wanting to be just like really in tune with my body and knowing what it felt like. So I did know then when it was time to ask for the epidural. So we just like kept increasing. It's probably around 2 p.m. at this point, and I stood the whole time. I was so committed, which is crazy in hindsight looking back. But I remember knowing like, okay, I couldn't talk through the contractions as much, and even the time in between contractions began to shorten, and I couldn't focus as much during that time. I remember we had like fixer upper on my girl Joanna Gaines and Chip, and I just wasn't focused. I was like, I can't focus on anything, even in between the contractions. And I think this is a really important point too. Like, if you, especially with your first kiddo, you feel this desire to over prepare and over learn. And the reality is, like, you're not going to know what you need until you're in the moment. So, talking about that with your partner ahead of time, of like, this could be what I want. Like, I thought I wanted Ryan to like physically touch me in certain places where I know that I have pain, and it turned out I didn't want that. I couldn't hear words. I'm like, don't talk. Like, just like, zip it until I tell you that I'm ready to hear your words, which is not like me. But I think just going into it, being like really honest and communicative in the most respectful and compassionate way is a beautiful thing baseline. But especially when, you got this job to do of like getting baby out safely and keeping mom as safe as possible too, emotionally, physically, all of the above. So the time came around 2:30. I remember being like, Ryan, like, I don't think I could do this for much longer. Like, it's time for the epidural. Very important lesson learned here, which we were able to implement for our second kiddo, which will be a different episode because there's only so much talking I can do solo. Already 20 minutes in, and I'm like, all right, I gotta land the plane. I'm doing too much talking. But we called for the epidural, and it was too late. Like, I really needed to call for the epidural about 30 minutes prior, knowing that it could be a long time for the anesthesiologist to get to us, which is exactly what happened. So the anesthesiologist got brought into an emergency situation and was not available for another hour and a half. So, ladies, I experienced the feelings of getting to 6 centimeters without an epidural, which was truly not part of my birth plan at all, or the birth suggestion that I had provided for myself. Because I just didn't want that type of stress to be built up in my body, knowing that I wanted to work hard to combat the adrenaline, fuel the oxytocin in the best way, and I was in pain, and contractions were probably at this point 90 seconds with like not a long time in between. I want to say maybe like 20 to 30 seconds in between. So we made it through by the grace of all the Lords, and my incredible partner in Ryan just being my coach and supporting me through it. You black out, truly, like thinking back to it. I'm like, what did that even feel like? And in the moment, it's crazy that you could even forget what that feels like. But that's good perspective, because you can do hard things for a very short amount of time. And I remember like that was really the mantra that I had in my back pocket, of like, I can do hard things for a short amount of time. This won't last forever. I'm gonna make it through. I had my essential oils with me on my scrunchie, which is my favorite labor hack and honestly life hack at this point. I put my lavender and my eucalyptus on a big, beautifully pink velour scrunchie on my wrists, and I just remember breathing it in and doing my best to make it to the moment the anesthesiologist walked in. And let me tell you, it happened. He came in, and I was very scared of getting that needle in between contractions because I had no control over the movement of my body. And that part was scary. Again, relinquishing the control there of just knowing You're under the care of professionals. They know what they're doing. This isn't their first rodeo, giving a very, very large needle in your spine to a mama who's having intense contractions that are long and a quivering, shaking body, which we'll circle back to in a little too. But I just remember feeling like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? But it happened. Thank heavens. They had Ryan turn away, I believe. I think that either happened with our first or our second. I blend them together. But I remember he had to stay in the room because it was COVID and he couldn't leave. So we were both sequestered to our room 25/7. And oh my, the relief of an epidural. I don't know how mamas do it without it, truly. It was the most incredible feeling in the whole entire world. But I did want to make sure that I could feel a little bit. So at this point, it's like 4 p.m. Again, we requested the epidural at like 2:30, but we were feeling relief. We were flying high. They just kept coming in and feeding Ryan, like giving him sandwich after sandwich. And I wasn't even hungry. I was more like thirsty and I just wanted my Gatorade, which I was able to have. Um, and I remember the nurse who had switched at this point. She came in like an angel from above. And she turned off the lights and was like, "This is your time to relax. Just relax." She put a little peanut ball in between my legs, tilted me to try to get, the gravity to work as much as possible. And I remember wanting to be upright, like even in the hospital bed when I couldn't stand anymore. I'm like, the chair or the back of the hospital bed couldn't be more upright enough. I like created a chair out of the hospital bed, which felt really good for my body. Again, I didn't expect that in the moment, but just like if there's a time to advocate for yourself, like this is the moment. This is the time to do that. And so we put on Crazy Rich Asians, watched it, loved it, just leaned in to the sun setting on this long marathon of the past couple of weeks, but especially the past day. But knowing that, the moves are going to be made soon, like big moves. Um, and fun fact, this is so cheesy, but very Michelle, if you know me. Our wedding song played in Crazy Rich Asians, which was just it was so great. Um, and our wedding song is Can't Help Falling in Love by Elvis Presley. And that's the song. It's their own version in Crazy Rich Asians when she's walking down the aisle getting married. So I had all the feels, and it almost like, it was like a little renaissance of like, okay, she's about to enter like the next phase of labor soon. Let's go. Like we had our playlist queued up, ready to go when we knew it was time. Um, and when I got the epidural, I was about 6 centimeters dilated. So I knew I had, some time to go. And Ryan updated everybody on the group chat and, made sure everybody was updated there. That's also important to talk about. And Mel and I dove into this a little bit in one of the babies episodes. So go back and listen to it. But you really set the tone and start drawing those boundaries when you're in the hospital. Who's going to be the point person? I remember I didn't want my phone at all. Like I didn't want to talk to anybody but Ryan and myself. And so just being on the same page of like how often the updates are going to be, who's going to be the one to send them, like who's going to be the manager of all of that. And that was really important for me that was Ryan. So just like another making an invisible task very visible in this process as then you phase out to like going home and continuing to draw the boundaries that you have to as you're building your family and figuring out how to be a parent when you've been husband and wife for so long. Like it's the start of it. You set the tone. And so, just a little important tangent there. But zooming back, we're watching Crazy Rich Asians. We hear our wedding song. It's about, I don't know, 6:30, 7 o'clock at this point. And the doctor comes in and he checks me and he's like, "Let's go. Let's do this." And and the adrenaline rush at that point was truly unmatched. Um, we were just ready to run a marathon. Um, I remember we had LeBron James playing on in the background, and I'm not going to say my son's name, but if you know my son's name, it's very similar to his name in some capacity. So it also was like another sign, like, let's go. It felt right. And we did one practice push. And then the doctor's like, no, we're not ready yet. And I was like, are you kidding me? Did I do something wrong? Like, give me feedback. I need explicit guidance. Like, what did I do wrong? And the nurse was like, no, he's got to keep dropping a little bit lower, a little bit lower. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. At this point, it's like 8 p.m., 8:30, and we're just waiting. Like just again, like waiting long haul. We kept busy, but it's again just a really important reminder that like baby will come when baby is ready, and it feels like forever, truly forever and ever. Um, but we waited. It was time. I'm trying to think if I remember the exact time that we started to like really, really push. I want to say it was around 9 p.m. And the adrenaline came, like it came back, but we worked to combat it. We worked to turn it into this natural oxytocin. And right as I was about to push, I remember feeling like, okay, wait, I'm feeling painful contractions. Like the button, I got the epidural. Oh, I meant to say this before. I got the epidural that I was able to click a button and give myself a little bit of a burst if I was feeling more pain, because I did want to be mindful that I wanted to feel the pressure. So I knew when to push and someone wasn't telling me. Because what I learned in my birth course, which is so fascinating, that your contractions actually change directions when it's time to push. So your contractions are going horizontally for most of labor. And then when it's time to push, they shift to vertically, which is what you feel when it's time to do that pushing, which just feels like a big giant poop. Um, I promise. Like that's what it is. So if you want to practice the breathing while you're, going to the bathroom all the time, it's a great way to practice. And so I remember just feeling like too much on one side of my body. So the nurse kind of rotated me a little bit like a chicken before it was really, really time to push. But I wanted to feel the pressure and I felt the pressure, which felt great. And then it was go time. I mean, I remember like pushing in my face, even though they told me over and over and over again, like, push with your stomach, push with your body, use those abs. And I was ready to do that. But when it's go time, you just kind of like freeze like a goat and you don't expect it. But we pushed, we persevered, we had our music going on in the background. I needed Ryan to be like up here with me, holding my hand. Like, I needed his face to be adjacent to my face because what's happening down below is also just so close. But I wanted him up with me. And I pushed for a long ass time. Baby came out at 10:31 p.m., which you don't forget that one. It's 10:31 on September 22nd. And I just remember this insane relief. Oh, I do remember. It's crazy when you let your brain go to the memory, you just remember all of the things that surface. They asked me if I wanted a mirror, like right before he was born, to see his head. They were like, he's got so much hair. Do you want to see him? And I was like, hell no. Do I want to see that? I'll never be able to unsee that. So we passed on the mirror, but the irony is we were in a corner room with a ton of windows. So I remember looking up at one point and the nurse was like, you're almost there. Like he's gonna come out soon. And I remember seeing the reflection, and I saw too much that I can't unsee in the reflection of the window. But it was really motivating to know like he's coming out soon, like let's go. And then he comes out, and I remember that moment of knowing that he came out, because the relief was just so insanely immense. And it's like nothing, it's the biggest poop of your life, like that's it. And I remember just waiting to hear him cry, and it felt like forever, even though it was 2 seconds, but we heard him cry, and they plopped him on my chest, and all of the gooey, bloody deliciousness that's not, but is, it's such a two truths, no lies. And it's just like the emotional moment. Oh, I'm getting a little emotional talking about it, of like you're not a parent and then you are a parent. And like looking at Ryan with me in that moment, it's just so beautiful and so unexpectedly emotional. You know you're gonna be emotional, but you just don't know the caliber um that it can get to know like you made me a mom in that moment. And it's just so beautiful. And I remember our little guy came out with, he was like sucking on his wrists as like a self-soother. So he had like two little scabs on his wrist. And I remember immediately going into worry mode. Like, what does that mean? Like, is he okay? Does he need a band-aid? Is he too small for a band-aid? Like, do we need bacitracin? And then I'm like, oh, these are those worry thoughts that people tell you about. It started truly at 10:33 p.m., 2 minutes after he was born. And then, you go through the second round of delivering your placenta, which, to be honest, I didn't even feel, didn't even know that was happening, because there was so much going on up top that, they just do their thing down below and it just happens. And then they're just so quiet and serene, and they bundle them up in this beautiful little swaddle after golden hour. I know I'm jumping all around here, but it's really important to both Ryan and me that we had that skin to skin time. And I remember he like started feeding right away, which has tracked. He loves his food and has a great appetite. But after that, I wanted to make sure it was important to us that Ryan also had that skin to skin time with him, and to sync up. Like you literally sync up, like it's like you're on the same Wi-Fi network when you're doing that oxytocin skin to skin. And then that was also another, important boundary that we wanted to draw. Like that was our time. It was so late at night. But that golden hour is something that you can't get back. And I didn't want to spend that time on the phone. I wanted to spend that time with our son and Ryan in this beautiful bubble that we found ourselves in. So I remember Ryan sending a quick text to everybody like, baby is here, Michelle is healthy and safe, and we'll FaceTime you, in a little while, even though it was really late. But that was an important thing for us. And then, the nurse comes in and does all of the, they think they have to give him a shot, take the footprint, put the little thing, the vitamins in their eyes, and bundle them up in the most beautiful, nugget of a swaddle that they'll ever have. And it'll be the last time they're ever unable to break out of a swaddle like that. Both of our babies were Houdinis. And it's just such a surreal moment, such a miracle moment of looking at this little person who was inside of me for the past 10 months, literally at that point. And knowing like we made it, and the exhaustion was something that I've never felt before, but it sat so close next to this euphoric, energetic zest for life that you just can't define. Um, and it was just so incredible. So then they finally wheeled us over, probably around midnight at that point, to the mommy and baby postpartum room, and we FaceTimed our families and shared, his name and his picture, the FaceTime picture, and just, leaned into this next chapter. Um, and I remember I couldn't fall asleep, which is such a crazy thing. I had like a hormonal headache, and I mean, your body just literally went through a trauma, as Mel and I have talked about before. Um, and then you're just like, okay, what now? Here we go. And I think that shift, I would actually love to do an episode with Mel about that, like the shift of all of the buildup that I've talked about, like from weeks 38 to 41, and then you transition to like the hospital and everything that I just explained. And then the shift immediately goes to like feeding, diapering, keeping a baby alive. We had a moment of panic, and it was like our first moment. We were like gold stars for us. Like he was choking on amniotic fluid. And I remember they give you that little sucker. This was like the next morning when we woke up, but they give you this sucker to get it out. And you just uninhibitedly like know what to do, which is like a weird instinct, like a parental instinct that I've just inherited. But it's like, oh, we're in charge of keeping you alive. That comes with a lot of amazing feelings and a lot of worry feelings at the same time. Two truths, no lies. And so, that was just a whole new landscape that we knew we were going to have to navigate. It's not that we were blind to that, but it's a completely different experience when you're, fully immersed in it. Um, and I think, knowing that it was COVID, knowing that there were so many germs that I wanted to keep my baby away from, and how to just curate this safety environment, that has always now been a thing for me, of just safety, safety, safety. And if anything gets in the way of safety, I know that that's a trigger for me. But it truly did all start knowing that, we brought our beautiful first son into the world in the middle of a global pandemic. And that is a wild ride, was a wild ride. So I've talked a lot. It's a lot for me to talk for 40 minutes straight without Mel validating me and asking me questions and telling me all the things that I forgot to say. But I just thank you for listening. For the first time moms out there, and induction moms out there, and pandemic moms out there, and moms who feel like maybe their story doesn't count because it wasn't how they pictured it, or, just remember, like, however your baby comes into this world, fast, slow, induced, unmedicated, surgical, chaotic, calm, whatever that looks like, C-section, vaginal, like, your story counts. And it's a beautiful reminder of the final chapter before chapter one. And that in and of itself is just such a incredible thing to experience and to relive, even talking about it. And then, those early days, if you felt alone in those early days in some way, you're not, and leaning on the people who you can lean on. And Mel and I will take that on another time too. We have a couple of postpartum episodes, fourth trimester episodes, which we dive even deeper into that. So if you find yourself pregnant, wanting to learn more about that, please, please, please go listen, because that needs to be explored just as much as when you're expecting and in the labor and delivery, because you meet so many new parts of yourself over and over again, and will continue to, because the reality is, when you give birth to your first child, the child who makes you a mom, your identity is changed forever. And parts of you become multiplied, parts of you become minimized. You're always meeting these new versions of yourself because you are biologically different. You are emotionally different. You're just zoomed out, holistically changed for the better, for the most incredible reasons. But also, what sits next to that is challenges too. And so embracing that head on and learning about it before it happens, there's such knowledge and there's such power in all of the knowledge. And that's what inspires Mel and I every day to think of ideas for episodes and to come on here weekly and to share and download our brains and our hearts and our experiences, because we just want to make sure that, there's a thread of commonality for moms and parents and people navigating this world thinking like, am I the only one? I promise you you're not. Even though your story looks different, and even though when you lift up the hood, there are so many differences, there are so many commonalities too. And just to know that you're not alone is a relief and a way to just breathe out, a breath of fresh air in and of itself. So I thank you for joining this episode on the M Take today. I welcome all the follow-up questions, or maybe the things that I forgot to mention, that maybe you're wondering about if you're a first-time mom, pregnant, about to give birth, or a second-time mom and you're wondering, we want to know all the wonderings, all of the questions, all of the things that maybe you're afraid to ask, or that starts with silly question. No, nothing is silly. Tell us. We want to know. So we can take it on for you. That's the goal. So this is what Mel usually says, but I'll take a stab at it as I've done in the past, even though she does a way better job than I do. You all know where to find us at the M Take. We are on Instagram. We're also on YouTube now, evidently. I'm not sure if I'll post this to YouTube, but we'll see. You'll definitely get the audio. And just thank you for giving it your best shot, right? That's all you can do in this world and in this life. And put one foot in front of the other, no matter what phase or stage you are in. So give yourself a big ol' smooch for waking up today, and give yourself a big ol' smooch for being the chief marketing officer of every transition of your life and the project manager for everyone in your world. You're doing amazing. So thank you for joining, and catch us next time. Toodles.